Newsfirst Newsline with Faraz Shaukat Ali.
And good morning to you. This is Newsline, live as always from the Newsfirst studios in Dawson Street in Colombo. And this morning, as some schools are due to reopen, we had the news, of course, last night that somewhat of a tense situation had arisen in the Negombo police area, and that overnight police curfew was imposed there, and it is now being lifted, and no reports of any major upheaval apart from what had happened last night, which had been contained by the security forces. To discuss as to what level of understanding our parliamentarians have of the seriousness or not of the situation currently prevalent. We're joined by a member of parliament, and he's, although from the Kegol area, we just thought we'd ask him as to what the level of understanding was. And he's right here in the studio with us, Mr. Tariq Balasurian, member of parliament. Very good morning. Thank you very much for coming.
Good morning.
What is the level of understanding that your colleagues and you have of the complexity or the seriousness of this current problem?
First, I don't think the understanding of the members of parliament at the moment is to a satisfactory level, especially since ISIS is, although we have seen and heard about ISIS on radio and news and TV, but we haven't seen it being operational in Sri Lanka. It's a different form of terrorism,
yes.
And I think in order to combat it, we particularly have to concentrate on things such as information technology. And also the mystery behind the April 21st attacks has been, why and who's behind it.
Yeah.
And I think the Cardinal also has said once or twice that there's perhaps wheels within wheels, and maybe there's a larger force behind these attacks. It's not just the ISIS forces, but it's any international players trying to make us dance to a certain tune which they want in order to benefit themselves. So I think a lot of the MPs are looking for answers for these questions, and also I think the understanding of how ISIS operates is lacking to a certain extent.
Is there some genuine sadness that nearly 10 years after the end of hostilities, if you like, and the fight against terror came to an end, almost 10 years, there's a sense that we've gone back, and therefore that the present government don't appear to know what they're doing? Is that about right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's genuine sadness all over the country. Yeah. I mean, I'm 45 years old, and then I lived 30 years of that life during a war period. So the first 5 years of my life, I didn't experience any war, any civil unrest.
Yeah.
But pretty much the rest of my life, has been wasted, and this country has not progressed because of the 30 years of war. And then we still haven't seemed to have learned our lessons. And just 10 years after we achieved peace, I think it seems like history is repeating itself. I think with yesterday's Negombo incidents, we don't know the extent of damage which has incurred there yesterday. But if communal riots spread, that's our biggest fear. And it seems like, I don't know whether it's been orchestrated. I don't know whether there's a likelihood that it might spread to other areas of the country. So I certainly think that, it's not 10 years, it's just like, it's a lifetime we are wasting, in trying to get this country on the right track.
There is a sense of genuine frustration amongst, let's take a look at the entrepreneurs who've invested millions of dollars, much of it borrowed money, in tourism-related assets. And, you know, we've come a long way, and we seem to be on a good path. Sri Lanka just recently, not long ago, named by TripAdvisor as the best destination to go to. Now, all of these things are obviously, the nature of these assaults were also aimed at tourists. We had a very, the British businessman, well, based in Britain, you know, he lost 3 of his 4 children here. And we had a member of the royal family in Denmark attending the funeral. There is an international dimension that cannot be controlled by the mere banning of social media platforms over here, necessary as it is. But what do you think? How did this all go wrong? You know, these guys didn't just suddenly go and borrow some of the weapons that are left over by the LTTE, where did they?
Yeah, I think for us, there's the short-term negligence of the government, and then also there's the long-term symptoms, which we all ignored. I think, you know, if you look at the short-term negligence, it's just outright negligent. That there were security lapses, and then there were intelligence warning just two hours before the attacks, and then as well as, you know, maybe the first intelligence reports were reported on April 4th, and then again on April 9th, and I think again on April 20th. And then, but even if you go back to the Maunala incident, a lot of politicians try to keep it hush-hush. A lot of people...
Well, you're from Kegal, yeah. Close enough to Maunala. Tell us about that. What was that about?
2 youths were caught vandalizing Buddhist statues, right. And then they were arrested. And then the politicians of the area, they said that, you know, these 2 kids are mentally retarded. That's why they started breaking Buddha statues. But and then there were also allegations that there were Muslim politicians who had called and interfered in the investigations of what was happening. But through the Maunala incident, the police was able to discover the one of the in Puttalam district, and then they discovered 100 kgs of C4 explosive. And then some politicians said that it's going to be used for fishing, and other politicians said there were going to be further attacks on Buddha statues. I mean, you don't use C4, you don't need C4 explosive to break a Buddha statue. All you need is a hammer. So I think, you know, the government was trying to cover all that up, and although the president states that he was not informed, I think, you know, we have been made aware that there was a 17-page dossier which was handed to him on the 16th morning before he left to Singapore, and again about Muslim extremism. It's been said that in the National Security Council it was reported some like 47 times or something, and then both the Prime Minister and the President, because of the concept of reconciliation that they have put forward, they didn't want to step on anybody's toes. I think so. The short-term aspects were there, but also I think the long-term aspects are also to be considered.
How do you think this, the radicalization of certain sections of the Muslim community, how is that allowed? It appears to me that it was all too easy for these people to collect whatever they collected. And it's also easy to make the connection and say, well, Sri Lanka had opportunities. They had opportunities not available in another country because we finished this 30-year-odd war 10 years ago, and perhaps some of the implements of that war found its way to these people. But there is no such evidence now, so far anyway. We don't. If there was, nobody's told us. But how do you think this radicalization of some sections became possible without apparently our intelligence people knowing about it?
The radicalization, I think, it's not a local phenomenon, it's a global phenomenon.
Right.
I think for the last, especially after the end of the Cold War, the Wahhabism has been spreading rapidly in other countries. It's estimated there are more than 15, Saudi Arabia has sponsored more than 15,000 Wahhabist schools teaching extreme form of Islam.
But also, Tariq, when you look at the way the superpowers, let's put it all out of the way and say it up front, the US, the way they have pandered, almost pandered, to the de facto king of Saudi Arabia, the Crown Prince, MBS as it's called. The way they've pandered to him over the Jamal Khashoggi case, it's totally unacceptable. It's almost on a different scale. Is like what happened to our former colleague, friend of this network, and the place that I worked thereafter, the boss of the place, Lasanta Vikramatunga. It astounds us as to what happened then. It astounds us why they still haven't got to the bottom of that. And likewise, when Jamal Khashoggi went into the sanctity of his country's embassy in Turkey, he didn't come out alive.
Yeah.
To this day, we don't know with any certainty as to what happened to his body, which is supposed to have been dismembered into different parts. And it's unacceptable that President Trump flashes an image of a check for so many billions of dollars and says, oh, look, I've managed to sign this. So petrodollars played its own special role, and the way they sort of tolerate what happened.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, how much was the check? I think it was something like 310 billion or something.
That's right. Yes, it's a huge amount. So I think the entire American defense industry would have benefited from that check.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you look at the life of one journalist, compared to 310 billion dollars.
Precisely the point I'm making.
And Trump knows where his priorities lie.
Also, in Sri Lanka, we seem to have, we have this so-called openness, transparency, strong judiciary, independent judiciary, and so on, and an independent police commission, and so on. The IGP is on leave. The defense secretary was asked to resign, and he's gone. Then when you look at this whole context, you find the way that our senior people are being handled or mishandled sends the wrong message. We had the CDS, a former Army Navy commander, Admiral Ravi Vijayagunratna, who was remanded, and to get some statement. It's not the way you handle these people. You're sending the wrong message. Unless there was some prima facie thing, then then get rid of him.
Yeah.
But it almost sounds that these are all, like the FCID, it was basically a political tool.
Yeah.
Because what is it doing now?
Yeah.
They had another commission for against serious allegations of whatever.
Yeah.
Then we had the commission to look into the issuance of the bonds.
Yeah.
Nothing's happened. It's all a bit of waffle.
Yeah. I think, from the inception itself, that's why we were saying the marriage between the UPFA and the UMP is not going to last. Because there's too much difference in opinion, and there's too many personality clashes.
Yeah.
And I also think that the president has got himself into a corner now that he's alienating a lot of people, and there's not a good quality base of people around him. So his appointments tend to be weak. If you look at the secretary to the former secretary to the Ministry of Defense, I mean, everybody knew who the man was, and President puts the blame on the IGP and the secretary to the Defense. Who appointed them? Did we appoint them? No, we didn't. The Secretary of the Defense was appointed by the President.
It's obvious that this political marriage between Ranil Wickremesinghe and their choice of common candidate, let's not forget that, has obviously not worked. But to be fair, the President, of course, let Ranil and his team have free rein at the beginning, until the details of the bomb scam started coming out.
Yeah.
And then I think the president knew that, this guy has really let the side down. And I believe that was the breakup, the initial breakup of this whole matter. And then there were patches, you're trying to patch it up.
Yes and no, but I think because also Ranil Wickremesinghe has been working according to an international agenda, and it's very evident from day one. The first thing Mangala Samaraweera goes and does is sign, 30/1 resolution, and all this is a continuation of 30/1 resolution. And if you really look at the 30/1, the human rights resolution, it's not a resolution about regime change. It's a resolution about system change. And what's taking place right now? Why is the Prime Minister so anxious in passing the Prevention of Terrorism Act at this junction? Is that the most important thing?
Or is it the most important thing to accept the Millennium Challenge Corporation's money?
Absolutely, absolutely. All this is, I think, 410 for 400 odd million US dollars for an economic corridor from.
There are grave concerns about that.
Absolutely. So I think there are wheels within wheels, and you also have to take into consideration the geopolitics aspects of what's happening in Asia. I think in the 1980s to a certain degree, and the 1990s to a certain degree, with India exerting the Indira doctrine, that the interference of Western countries in the subcontinent was to a minimum. But also with the change of India's foreign policy, and India being more US friendly, especially under Prime Minister Modi, I think it can be seen that the US is trying to get a foothold in Sri Lanka, and also we have signed some military treaties with them for logistic purposes. And
again, those are they worrying for you as a parliamentarian?
Well, they're worrying for me because we don't know about them. We don't know. They have not been brought before Parliament. So I think.
I want to say, this business about I don't know is catching.
Yes.
Because you've just said it as well.
Yeah.
The Prime Minister said I didn't know.
Yeah.
The President said I didn't know.
Yeah.
So who knew?
I think to a certain degree, certain international agreements which we have signed, including the Singapore Free Trade Agreement, and also this particular agreement, the acquisition and the class service agreement, which has been signed with by the Defense Secretary. It was actually initially signed by I believe it's by Gotabaya Rajapaksa, and it was renewed by this government with additional concessions being granted to the U.S. And it has been said that the U.S. intelligence and the military is already here. The MI5 is already here.
Well, I don't know about MI5, but I saw the FBI with my own eyes.
Okay, and now
during this investigation.
And now the American embassy is asking for diplomatic status for all these people who are coming in. So I don't know whether this is the right direction which we want to go. But we also must keep in mind that the dynamics of international politics has changed, and when we cannot ignore certain parties, we have to either be with them or we have to be against them. That's the way the U.S. I think perceives the rest of the world, and it's certainly in this fight against the jihadist terrorist movements, I think we should be with U.S. Having said that, now there's also a bigger question of who's behind all this.
Yeah.
So because there are certain conspiracy theories which I really don't want to get into, but then there are security experts such as Graham Fuller, who has published few books stating that the U.S. is responsible for the creation of ISIS, at least if not to the extent of providing arms, but to the extent of creating the background, so that IS will be formed. And I think the other journalists, such as Edward Snowden, has gone to the extent saying that the ISIS leader, the Baghdadi, is a Mossad agent. So that's why I'm saying that there's a lot of unknown. We don't know who was exactly behind these attacks and the real reason for that.
Which is why in Sri Lanka we bemoan the well-known fact that there is a lacuna in political leadership.
Absolutely, I think we have seen that for the last 4 years, and as opposition, that we build as the opposition, that's what we have said, that we believe in the better leadership and more of a strategic approach to where the country should lead.
But what is the way forward? The Catholic Church is doing, it's been widely hailed as being the peacemaker, the peacekeeper. But for how long? How long can you contain? Because these fines all around the country, in a way, don't you think it's good? I think it's good. Because, we've gone and done all these searches, and all sorts of jolly good things have come up, jolly bad things actually. Yeah. But not only linked to this terror thing, but all sorts of things have come up. Yeah. It's like a spring clean. Yeah. It's good that these things have been done and all sorts of things have been found. And I see that the police are saying, if you've got any machetes and unauthorized stuff, come and hand them in. Yeah. Good. Yeah. What's your take on that, on this whole search operation?
Well, once again, there are the short-term measures which you need to take, and also the long-term measures. The short-term, I think the search operations are part of the short-term measures. But also, we need to find out where the money is coming from. And I blame to a large extent on the Muslim politicians, because the Muslim politicians were funded by these Wahhabis.
But that's the whole problem, isn't it? Isn't it government policy that when aid is asked for, that there is a system, there is a procedure. When you start departing from due process, then you're getting into all sorts of trouble. So there's this accusation, and we've highlighted it time and time again, how they departed from due process. And so even in this case, this due process has been departed from.
Yes, because it's very easy for an MP to form let's say a foundation, parliament as private members motion, parliamentary member can bring a private member's motion to set up a foundation. And once it's gazetted, then you can get international funding through such organizations. So whether there was a mechanism to monitor where the money is coming from is an issue. But I also see this as an opportunity because a lot of Muslims have been coming forward and they have been reaching out to the Sinhalese and the Sinhalese. So I think I particularly see this as an opportunity where certain legislations can be passed, and then I think we need to break that mentality that us versus against them mentality, which has been I think crept into the Muslim societies during the last 10 or 15 years. So certain things such as the banning of the burqa, I think that kind of spontaneous lawmaking has to be stopped. I think if you're going to ban the burqa or something, you need to look at it from overall security perspective. And then
well, they've done this in France. I mean, all it is they say we want to make, we need it's the identity.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, that from a national security perspective, but you cannot just take this incident and say, and you should ban the burqa, because what we need to think is whether the radicalization, wearing of the burqas, did that take place due to radicalization, or did they become radicalized because you started wearing a burqa?
But this all started in 1977, when people started going to the Middle East to work. And when they came back, they bought some bits and pieces of a different culture, same religion, but a different culture.
Yeah.
There's nothing, to say that you must put this thing on.
Absolutely.
There's nothing in the book about that.
Yeah.
These are cultural things that have grown over time.
Yeah.
And then when when Sri Lankans went abroad and came back, and brought with them the new ideas, it only appears to have alienated that community.
Yeah, I don't necessarily believe that these are cultural things which has grown.
Yeah.
Because these have been, I mean, if you look at, I don't think you need to go as way back as 77, because I think especially the wearing of the burqa has become more prominent within the last 10 or 15 years. And then I think Muslim communities, especially in the rural areas from where I live in Kegol district, I think they have perhaps been living more separate from the rest of the communities, maybe also within the 10 or 15 years. But to give you an example, the madrasas and the Arabic teaching schools, which have cropped up like mushrooms all over the country. Now in Wilpola, I got a call yesterday or day before in Aranayaka. Apparently there's a madrasa in front of the Muslim school. And these, the colleges start at 10 p.m. and they finish the teachings at 3 p.m. So I think, from a national security perspective, you always have to wonder when something starts at, in the middle of the night at 10 p.m. and then finishes at 3 p.m. What are they discussing? Yeah, so I don't think, I think, so there has been, through the Muslim politicians, by funding the Muslim politicians, I think there has been attempt to radicalize at least the thought process of certain Muslims in Sri Lanka. I mean, let's not forget, when this Muhammad Sahran character, when he gave sermons about...
They were hate speeches.
They were hate speeches, but 3,000, 4,000 people comes and listen to his speeches.
And it's sad that the intelligence people didn't pick that up, but they're quick to pick up other lesser matters. Still, we've run out of time, Tarak Palasuri. Thank you ever so much for being on the program. and look forward to welcoming you again on our network.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, and that's the way it was on Newsline. We'll take care, have a great week ahead, be safe, and of course, God bless you.
Newsfirst Newsline with Faraz Shaukat Ali.